Keep watching The Politics every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Welcome to Talking Politics. My name is Robert Press. As you can see, I'm a reporter for the Bronx Post, and we didn't have our advertisement for our Bronx Post, Mr. Producer, so we'll have it during our middle of the show. I also write for the Parkchester Times. Both like this show are part of Parent Media Corporation, and I contribute also to the Co-op City News. Have a blog at www.100%.blogspot.com, along with Facebook pages 100% and what is going on in your neighborhood. What is going on in your community board, I should say. The views expressed on this show are those of the host, myself, or any guest who I have today, or anyone who is commenting at the bottom of the screen, like several people usually do. Let's go to the weather report today. For today, Friday, it looks like a high of about 55. Saturday, 58. Sunday, the mid-60s with rain coming in overnight. And Monday, a high reaching 60. So it looks like winter is over and spring is here. But let's see what happens with April. Let me introduce my guest. Mr. Producer, can we bring on my guest financial advisor, Anthony Ravecchio, who is going to talk about the recent stock market tumble and some other political news going on around here. Anthony, are you here with me?
Robert, good morning.
Good morning, Anthony. You look great.
So do you.
Now, as I mentioned, the stock market is tumbling. You're a financial advisor. What is going on here?
Well, this morning it's not tumbling at all. This morning it's up on average about 2%. However, since January 1, the beginning of the year, of course, depending on what sector of the market you've been in, your account could have gone down from anywhere from 10% to 30%. Anyone that owns 401ks is going to hate their mailing come April when they get their quarterly statement.
Well, it's still got 2 weeks left in March. Maybe, hopefully, like you say, the market has turned around, so it won't be that bad. Am I correct?
Well, I didn't say turned around. What I said was today, it's right at 2%. It went up 2%.
Now, we know that world politics is affecting this too, and the war in Ukraine. I've gotten word that the Ukraine is coming back to the peace talks. They want to talk, peace. They don't want to continue. They want the Americans the U.S. on their side. Do you have a little info on that?
Well, you covered a lot in that statement. Because I have a belief that we are in what I call a period of hysteria. So does anything affect our economy? Of course, right? There's no question about it. The question is to what variance, to what degree? I'll give you a small example. As your producer was saying just a few moments ago before we came on the air, he was talking about tariffs. Now, without getting specific, because if I got specific, we'd be on the show for 2 hours. But just so you understand tariffs in a very simple way, and I'm going to try to keep it simple more so for the audience because it can become very complex. According to the World Bank, which most people would not disagree with, international world trade, and this includes U.S. numbers, is 60%. So 60% of domestic product globally, including U.S., is 60%. Now, what is the U.S. variance to that? Well, we have an economy that generates 60% of our growth based on consumer spending, 10% of it on investment spending, 20% of it on government spending, and now today, anywhere from 10 to 20% in international trade. Why is everything I just said so important? Let me share some global numbers with you that I got just for this interview. Brazil, their GDP to their own country is 34%. China's number is 37% of trade. Cuba is 89%. Greece is 92%. Korea is 88%. Russia is 42%. Mexico. Mexico is 73%. And Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is 100%. So, and I can go on. So notice that I said global trade, including US numbers, was 60%. Our US trade, according to our economy, our own economy, is at 10 to 15%, whereas other countries are 60% or higher. So I say all that to say that any effect that happens to the United States, and of course, trade is going to have a negative or positive effect, but any effect, at least 4 times that amount, is going to hit another country, either better or for worse. So if I lived in some of those countries that I just mentioned to you, and these policies were now coming into effect, oh, I'd be very worried. I'd be very worried because living in an economy where 60, 70% of it is all about what another country does. Oh, I'd be very worried about that. See, we live in the USA that, of course, many people before us decided to create an economy where only 10 to 15% of that is based on international trade. So we can get more into that in more detail, but I want you to understand the variance of it.
And no, I understand, Anthony. And as far as Canada goes, they have a new prime minister, Mark Carney, who just came in, and he won by 85% of the Liberal Party there. And he's a former central banker. So what does that mean to U.S. and Canadian relations? Are the tariffs going to stick? Will Trump say no? What's going to happen with the U.S. and Canada?
Well, again, I'll try to keep it simple for the audience because it's a very complex question. Mm-hmm. These answers come from a bigger question, right? Meaning that if the U.S. decides, which we have for the last 60, 70 years, to be involved in international trade conglomerates or agreements, right? Then we have to deal with these type of parameters, again, knowing that the effect on us is very minuscule. So what does all that mean? Well, what that means is that and let me preface, please, by saying, as an economist and a financial advisor for 35 years, people that know me, some of your audience may not, of course, know me. When I talk money, I talk economics. I do not talk politics. The only reason I might mention politics is because, of course, you have to put a name on it, right? But as I've said many times in the past, the greatest Republican policies have come from Democrats, and the greatest Democratic policies have come from Republicans. So to answer your question now in simple terms, we're going to have a global problem because the U.S. has been so nice to other countries, knowing that we're not dependent on international trade. We've been so nice with other countries when it comes to tariffs and excise taxes, etc. Well, our current administration has decided that they want to change that. And notice I said current administration because, again, I'm not going to, talk politics. But what effect will it have? Right? Well, as far as the U.S. is concerned, it's going to try to stagger imports. So what happens when you stagger imports? Well, exports, in theory, should go. And when we have an economy that exports, that means our economy grows. Why? Because we're making domestic we're making domestic goods.
We're sending out more than we're getting in essence.
Correct. So the reason for this hysteria is that's the bigger purpose, that we want to stimulate exports. I will tell you from an economist's point of view, and again, this is just one man's opinion, I think our current administration is doing it backwards. If you want to stimulate economic growth, right? There are 3 major things that have happened since January 1. Number 1, of course, is tariffs. Number two is called Doge. Right? That's part of government spending when you fire people.
Yeah, we were going to get into that a little later. Okay, let's get into that right now. Go ahead.
Right, and the third thing is the proposed tax changes. Right, in my humble opinion, they should have done or tried to get the tax package in plan first. That would have guaranteed economic growth. Then you go into Doge. Then you go into tariffs. Sadly, by doing it the opposite way, Donald Trump is right. You're gonna have a transition. And some days that transition may not be too good.
You were going back to tariffs. We at one time had the NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. Whatever happened to that?
It's basically dead.
Because, I mean, with tariff talk, I mean, there's no free trade. And, going on.
You could thank Trump 1 for that instead of Trump 2. Okay. Trump 1 eliminated NAFTA, where we have our new trade agreement with Canada. That's, of course, now going into all sorts of conniptions.
And Governor Hochul is at Washington today. She's going to be talking to the president about not ending congestion pricing that she wants to keep. But now that the president also wants to put a natural gas pipeline through New York, what would that do as far as the pipeline coming through New York? Would that help or hurt New York or the economy?
Well, both. Both. I mean, of course, it will help New York because it creates jobs, right? Because that's where they're going to be working at, right? So it creates jobs for New York. So short term, it helps the economy of New York. I think your bigger question is what does it do to the United States? Well, let's go back to tariffs, right? Let me share something with you. Out of all of the things that we import in the United States, I'm going to give you our top 5 items. Cars, gasoline, computers, telephones, airline parts. So to answer your question, what I believe our current administration is again trying to do is within creating these American jobs, he wants to say to the world, and he said it already on occasion, we don't need your products. We can create our own.
Well, we have Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is said to be leading the resistance against Donald Trump. She wants to be taking the matters that are happening directly to the people, as Senator Bernie Sanders did in the past. She wants to stop oligarchy. Do we have that here in the United States, like in Russia? Or do you want to call, say, Elon Musk an oligarch, whatever the word, oligarchs? And she wants to follow suit in New York and Pennsylvania against him. She wants Sanders' approach Monday by fellow progressives, Jumaane Williams. What's happening with the progressives?
Well, wait a minute now. Again, I didn't think we were going to interject too much politics into this, but that's okay. But I'm going to take a step back and ask you, could you tell me what an oligarchy is?
Well, according to what I'm being told, it's a rich Russian, a Russian who is much like Michael Bloomberg. One would call Michael Bloomberg that.
I didn't know Michael Bloomberg was a Russian.
Well, it's comparison, it's a similar type of thing. It's the person who has the money and the power.
Oh, so we're talking money and power, right? Nationality has nothing to do with it. We're talking money and power.
Right.
The reason why I'm scared to answer that question is because I really think it's a matter of just opinion. One oligarchy could be another person's poor house or hen house.
Right.
So I really think I think you have to be more specific. And that's what I mean by this hysteria. You're throwing out words that nobody can even really define.
Well, I'm just going to sum up a little here because I'm almost at my commercial here. As AJ says, it's a group of people having control of a country organization or institution. And if you've noticed on my blog, 100%.
Well, let me answer that question then. And AJ, thank you for giving us that interpretation.
Oh, wait. Before you go, Anthony, let me just say on my blog that I've put from the U.S. attorney's offices where they've, the confiscated merchandise like a plane, a boat from so-called Russian oligarchs or others from other countries, because they, we're at war, we're at trade war with these companies or whatever. So go ahead. You want to put go ahead, Anthony. We'll go, and then we'll go to
first and foremost, let me say hi to your audience members, because I see they're saying hi to me. Again, I really have a problem with some of the hysteria. But to answer the question, we've been in an oligarchy since the day our country was born.
That's correct.
Right? I mean, what would you call Nancy Pelosi today?
Yeah.
What would you call her? This is a woman that trades on stocks before she calls the final vote into office. What would you call that?
All right, Anthony, I want to stop here for a commercial.
Absolutely.
And then we'll come back and we'll talk. We'll probably run over. So let me go to a commercial right now and talk about, hopefully it's our Bronx Post commercial. So, Mr. Producer.
Imagine a media platform that reshapes the conversation, empowers your voice, and redefines the Bronx community. Bronx Post, changing the reality, changing the narrative. For businesses, politicians, and government agencies, we offer targeted advertising solutions that drive results. Amplify your message. Reach the heart of the Bronx and beyond. Our platform connects you to the community. Learn more. Email info@bronxpost.com or call 718-892-5555. Visit www.bronxpost.com for breaking news and updates. Bronx Post, changing the reality, changing the narrative.
Okay, now Anthony, is Anthony still with me? Are you there, Anthony?
Hello.
Okay. I want to bring Anthony back on, Mr. Producer, so we can go and Anthony can take off his financial hat and we could talk some local politics. All right with you, Anthony? Now, the U.S. attorney is going after the hotels. All right, they're subpoenaing hotel records like from the Roosevelt Hotel on immigration. They want to know who is residing at these hotels. Yes, we can. AJ is saying drain the swamp. Okay. Now, any opinion on what's happening with these hotels? Is the U.S. Attorney's Office looking for
let me first answer a question that your audience member, I think, was trying to ask before we went on commercial. Very simple. My own opinion. The question was, how do I think the economy is going to go for the next 6 months to a year? Your audience member mentioned anywhere losing 10 to 30%. I won't go into percentages, but what I will say is, if these indications are true, meaning if Doge is cutting these people, if the tariffs are now going to be reciprocal, right? You're looking at a bumpy economy. And the things that will make the economy move are going to be, as I said a little bit earlier, last on the list. Not first, it's last. So I think the rest of this year is going to be a bumpy road. Next year, because those things will now go into place, presumably, I would suspect a much better 2026. To answer your question in regards to the hotels, we can talk politics now, I guess, right?
All right. Well,
Trump has decided that he wants to be that he wants his money.
Well,
he doesn't want his money going for the hotels.
AJ says remove lifetime appointments or term limits for all of them. Okay. Now, term limits does work in places, but term limits happens like, for instance, you have the Barons. You have Charles Barons and Inez Barons. That one was an assembly member, one was a city council member. What happened after term limits? They just switched positions. And we have Jeffrey Dinowitz and Eric Dinowitz. All right, Jeffrey's the assemblyman, Eric is the councilman. We all know that in 4 years, when Eric Dinowitz's term limited out, he will become the assemblyman, right, Anthony?
Yeah, right.
Okay,
it would be presumptuous, yes.
Right, we have these pairs that just keep changing positions. One goes from the city, one goes from the state. And that's what makes term limits bad. But let's go into a little primary talks with Hackle and Torres.
If I can respond to that for a moment.
Go ahead.
In theory, term limits, of course, in theory, is a good thing, and that's why the majority of people at that time voted for it. The reason why it doesn't work today is because of the bigger problem. It's people not wanting to get involved in the process.
Correct.
Because if you have people getting involved in the process, then term limits would be a lot more seamless. People of experience would leave, while rising stars would now come into that place. You're not having that now.
No, now, for instance, let's go into the state primary. Hackle is going to have a primary next year. It could be Richie Torres. It could be her current deputy lieutenant governor, Antonio Delgado. Both, though, are in low numbers in the primary. Does either Torres or Delgado have a chance against Hackle? Or maybe we see somebody else? I mean, I
definitely think the possibilities of seeing someone else is at least 50%. But presuming the candidates that you spoke, I think, if I can call him by his new title, Riverdale Richie, should probably prevail.
Let's move into the mayor's race. Now, State Controller Tom DiNapoli says, I'm going to stay out of the race. Nobody has served government at the top of the state. He's been with Andrew Cuomo when Cuomo was governor, but he is a Long Island resident and says, well, I live on Long Island, so I'm not getting involved in the New York City mayor races. Hopefully, he's learned some lessons from his experience in Albany. DiNapoli said of Cuomo, and people say, why is Andrew Cuomo, who is a former governor, had all of this power, now going to run for mayor? And he's going to have to, he was the boss of Kathy Hochul, but she's going to be his boss because the power is up in Albany. Any word on the mayor's race, on what you think, and who do you think has the lead right now? As we saw that Adrienne Adams just got in the race also, because Adrienne, and she's calling herself, just call me Adrienne. She don't want to be known by her last name. Okay, so that's interesting. Any words on the mayor's race? What's your prediction?
It's a wide open race. I think a lot of the candidates have some positives. Some of them have negatives. What I think in general terms, what might happen is whether you like progressivism or not, you have too many of them in the race. So unless they decide to unify together, you're going to have a non-progressive, I believe, eke it out. Who will that be? Well, I'm not sure if a controller who's basically a city accountant might be admirable for that job. So no disrespect to Brad Lander, but I would say that to any controller that was running for that position. You could be a great accountant, and I need great accountants, but I don't need a great accountant to be the head of the city. I need a great accountant to be number crunching the books.
And Tony, let me just say, I saw this morning. Brad Lander wants to build housing on 4 of the 12 city-owned golf courses. And one of them is the Northwest Bronx, which is Van Cortlandt Park, Marshalloo Golf Course. And Eric Dinowitz has said, no way you're going to do that. There's another one in Queens, Forest Park. And who knows, with Bally's putting their casino where they are, we could have housing on the rest of Trump links, or pardon me, Bally links, pardon me. Okay. So, if we have Mayor Landa, we might have housing instead of golf. Okay. And as far as casinos go, the Queens Casino by Metropolitan Park there, which is Steve Cohen, the owner of the Mets and Hard Rock International Cafe, they've cleared some more hurdles. The only problem they have is Jessica Ramos. All right. You have to have alienation of the parkland by the assembly member and the state senator, which, supposedly was said here at Ferry Point that Assemblyman Michael Benedetto and State Senator Natalia Fernandez already have the ink dry on that. But I can't say that for sure because nothing is etched in stone. However, we know otherwise with our local politicians, right, Anthony?
Alienation of parkland, sadly, is not, or I should say, is very familiar with the Bronx. And sadly, the Bronx elected officials, because of that prior experience, know how to alienate parkland, or in layman's terms, just get 20 envelopes and the job will be done.
For instance, we have Jeff Klein, who is pushing the Bally's plan, and Jeff Klein voted to alienate parkland in Van Cortlandt Park. So he's no stranger to alienating parkland. If I'm correct on that, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I just don't know if you can make that statement, blanket like that. I think the better way to say it is Jeff Klein was part of a Bronx deal. So, of course, he was part of that deal. The only one that wasn't a part of it was Jeffrey Dinowitz, where they basically said, okay, we're going to alienate Norwood, put in the water filtration plant. We're going to take that bulk of money, divide it by all the people that voted for it, so everybody can get the same amount and share it with their parkland.
Right, Ruben Diaz.
So if someone in City Island, the legislator for City Island, Mr. Benedetto, I want to use him as an example because he represents City Island. If he voted for it, well, he got 10 million, which was the same equal amount that everybody else got. And I can't say specifically what Michael did with the 10 million, but in theory, he was supposed to use it for his parkland in his area. And that happened all throughout the Bronx.
Right. And former borough president Ruben Diaz Jr., who was at that time voting on it, said, oh, look, Soundview Park. I got all this money to redo Soundview Park. Look at how beautiful it is. But let me kind of wind down here with a little bit on city spending. The city is spending more money than it takes in every year, potentially putting the mayor in a bind that should the Trump administration further slash federal funding, the Citizens Budget Committee says that an additional $3.6 billion is going to be needed to fully fund this current services, and the $115 billion proposal released in January he's got $550 million for housing vouchers, $464 million for overtime. All these hundreds of millions of dollars. What's happening with the city budget, and what will happen if Trump cuts like he is? We're going to be seeing cuts to the education, cuts all over. How will that affect city?
I think that's the bigger question. I couldn't comment on the city budget because if I could, I'd be the councilman. But I do think these national policies are going to have a city effect. Again, that goes both ways, right? Like you said, if Trump is putting in a pipeline in New York, that means there's jobs for New Yorkers. If there's jobs for New Yorkers, that means they're paying taxes, right? So money's coming in. But again, you have just the opposite effect. We could wake up Monday morning and find out we don't have any more New York State Department of Education.
Yep.
Right. So on down the line. So, it's going to, again, bumpy road.
Yeah, the Department of Youth and Community Development is totally relying on federal funds. If you remember, that's DYCD. And those are the, what do they call, the neighborhood advisory boards in the community boards. You know,
there is an article out. I believe now it's hit all the major newspapers that one of the things Doge has eliminated is a lot of federal tax credits to affordable housing programs. It's already been estimated here in New York City. It could, and this comes from Governor Hochul's office, which I'm sure is one of the reasons why they're there today. It could affect up to 150,000 units. So, okay.
All right. And speaking of housing, my last item is New York City last year produced the most housing since 1965. Brooklyn added 13,732 units, accounting for 40% of the 33,974 new homes citywide that were built last year. I mean, and it keeps going. But, you know, if this
you want to know why I'm smiling? You want to know why I'm smiling?
Right.
Because in the 1960s, when they built all of that housing was beautiful. You know why? Because it had a face, right? Or in layman's terms, we would call it Art Deco, right? Today's housing, the numbers you just described, none of it has a face, right? They all look like cardboard boxes.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, but in the 60s, you could only build so high, 6 stories on apartment buildings. You know, and you had special permits to go a little higher. Now you're going 20 stories, and it's boom. We saw in Riverdale where the Montefiore Medical Center was rejected. Montefiore was going to go 11 stories. Then they compromised down to 6 stories, which means that 45-story building they're proposing for Indian Village could go half to 20 stories. All right.
You know, Bob, you should cover the other part of that story, meaning, and I'll share it with the audience. Today, again, sadly, because of the city of yes, and the city of yes, in my opinion, did 2 things. Number one, it allows the city to build up to 15, 20 stories. And guess what? And that's minimum, by the way. And number 2, as part of that new law, they don't have to ask permission from the community board anymore. So
right.
They said, why? Because the community board no longer has the power. When they voted for the city of yes, they gave away their Euler power.
Well, no, the community boards opposed it. They would more impose 39 against it. Okay, so
Right.
I was 59. So it was still going against it. But like you said, with Trump taking away the money for housing, the 6,000 apartments that are proposed for the Metro North plan look like they could be in jeopardy. Am I right on that?
Could you repeat that?
The 6,000 or 7,000 apartments proposed with the Metro North rezoning, they look like they could be in jeopardy. Because
to my understanding, the majority, not all of it, but the majority, maybe 65% of it, is affordable housing based in different variations. Yes, that portions of that now could be at jeopardy.
All right, so let me end it there. We don't know now what the future of housing is going to be in the city because, as Anthony said, the federal government and Donald Trump wants to cut back on the money for affordable housing and other. We don't know what our schools are going to look like. It could be a trying time, but it could wind up, as Anthony says, just a short time, and then you'll see the better because, as we've heard, Honda wants to build a new auto plant here in the United States. So, that's what President Trump is looking for. He wants, instead of in the past, like we've exported products, if you remember Shark Tank, they said, we could build it across in China or in India or in Pakistan much cheaper than the United States. And this is the problem that we've had. We've had our jobs moved overseas. And Donald Trump, again, wants to try and bring these back. Am I right, Anthony?
Let me give you 2 quick examples on tariffs. And again, where we get a little bit hysterical. And then I'll give you an example that there is.
All right, not too long because we're running a little over, okay? So quickly.
Okay, if you went to the store and bought a hat, and you thought that hat was $10, but it was imported in from Japan, right? Now you go to the store, that hat is $12. Well, you're hesitating, right? You knew it was 10. But guess what? The hat made in America that's right next to it is $10. Maybe you didn't want that one, So you have to make a decision, right? That's what tariffs are. Now, let me give you a quick example of what tariffs are going crazy. You might have heard about that 200% import tax that we now have against Europe on liquor, right? I'm a Bailey's drinker. Bailey's per shot, $15, $20, depending on where you go. Last night, it was 80.
Wow. That means our bars are going to be hurting.
Well, there's been discussion that that tax might be eliminated by the weekend.
Right. Okay. Well, I see I got a break. I'm over. So let me thank my guest, Anthony Ravecchio, for coming on. I'll have to invite you on again sometime in the future. We'll talk a little more about the economy, about how it's going, how Donald Trump is doing, and local politics, as Anthony is one of our favorite local political operators, if I said it right. Did I say it right, Anthony?
That's one way to say it.
Okay. So let me thank you for watching today. And again, thanks, Anthony, for coming on the show. And I hope to see you next week. And I'm looking to have our candidates running for city council coming on. So I've had one, Joel Rivera, and anybody else who's running for city council. Time is free here. Okay. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.
Imagine a media platform that reshapes the conversation, empowers your voice, and redefines the Bronx community. Bronx Post, changing the reality, changing the narrative. For businesses, politicians, and government agencies, we offer targeted advertising solutions that drive results. Amplify your message. Reach the heart of the Bronx and beyond. Our platform connects you to the community. Learn more. Email info@bronxpost.com or call 718-892-5555. Visit www.bronxpost.com for breaking news and updates. Bronx Post, changing the reality, changing the narrative.
Keep watching.